so cool. I'm literally the one in that trailer, and I'm still like so excited, and I get chills.
There I am, Gary, there I am.
The whole thing is just so cool. The moment when the music starts to crescendo as I turn around, when I first heard the music, I was like, stop right there. That's just it's so amazing.
All right, so Brett Cooper just went off on Rachel Zegler, and I'm talking full send, no filter. And listen, it's not just some random internet drama. This is coming right after Disney's Snow White remake basically face-planted at the box office. Like, millions of dollars down the drain, fans walking out of theaters, and now Rachel's at the center of it all.
I'm really emotional, and I'm also really tired.
Again, you've probably seen the clips. Her saying the original Snow White was creepy, saying this version wasn't for men. Yeah, those ones. Well, Brett Cooper had some things to say about all that. And let's just say, she did not hold back.
I never wanted to come off as me being ungrateful for the opportunities I have. I can also be having the greatest time and simultaneously wishing people would stop sending me death threats. And maybe that's a weird takeaway.
But here's the wild part. This whole mess isn't just about one movie or one actress. It's about how far Hollywood's gone with remakes, with messaging, and with totally rewriting classics. And Brett? She basically said what a lot of people have been too scared to say out loud.
2030, it's predicted that 45% of women will be unmarried and childless. And why do you think that is? Well, it's because we have been told that, men are trash and that our career is the only thing that matters and that marriage and children will inhibit that, which is unnatural. That is biologically unnatural.
So in this video, we're diving into everything. What Brett actually said, why this movie bombed so hard, and whether Disney's finally starting to realize maybe audiences aren't buying the modern twist anymore. This isn't just Brett Cooper versus Rachel Zegler drama. This is a prime example of what's happening behind the scenes at Disney. How they've gone from box office royalty to releasing back-to-back flops that fans aren't connecting with.
Can't really say the same thing about Rachel Zegler. It'd be one thing if Snow White turned around and put a MAGA hat on or some bullshit. That's not, people don't want propaganda on the other side. They just want propaganda-free entertainment.
It's Hollywood, baby. And that really is the main point. We're not trying to turn Snow White into something that it's not. We're not trying to turn Snow White into a MAGA conservative movie. We're just trying to represent the values that Snow White is based in, the timeless values that we all loved growing up that are sadly being forgotten in this new adaptation.
So if you're here for more than just hot takes, and you want to understand why this Snow White disaster is way bigger than just one bad movie, yeah, you're in the right place. All right, if you've been even kinda paying attention to the internet this past year, you've probably heard something about the new live-action Snow White movie, and most of it hasn't exactly been glowing.
Rachel Zegler on the docket is she's an asshole. So she came out and took a large dump on half of the country, everyone who voted for Trump. So I attacked her, and then she came out and she said, I apologize. Like I went too far, but it wasn't sincere. And my team, my helpful team, pulled this thought from December 2023, in which, I would say she leans into her role as both victim and heroine.
So let's rewind for a sec and break this all down. Disney first announced Rachel Zegler would be playing Snow White back in 2021. Now, at the time, reactions were mixed. Some folks were excited. She had just come off West Side Story, she could sing, she had the look, kinda. But a lot of people were already skeptical, not necessarily because of Rachel herself, but because of Disney's recent track record with remakes.
The reason Snow White is called Snow White in this version of the film, because of course she is not white as snow, is because she and her family go through a snowstorm and survive the snowstorm, and so it's a mark of her resilience. That's why she's called Snow White.
Mirror, mirror on the wall.
Then came the interviews. In one of the first viral clips, Rachel described the original 1937 Snow White as weird and dated. She said the prince was a guy who literally stalks her, and she emphasized very clearly that this new version was not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to dream about true love.
Listen.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her.
Oh my God.
And I can only hope.
What does that mean?
That despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
That clip absolutely blew up on TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, everywhere. People were like, wait, why are you starring in a remake of a movie you clearly don't even like? It rubbed fans the wrong way, especially the ones who grew up with the original and saw it as a timeless classic, not something that needed fixing. And that wasn't the only moment.
Congrats on the film. How's it feel to finally have it come out?
Feels wonderful.
Feels wonderful.
In another interview, she doubled down and said this film was being made for a modern audience, and pretty much implied that if you're a guy, this movie isn't really for you. Cue another wave of backlash. So by the time Disney actually started promoting the movie, the hype wasn't hype anymore.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
It was damage control. Fans were already dragging the film before the trailer even dropped. It didn't help that the CGI looked off. The dwarfs were replaced by random, magical creatures, and the vibe was just off.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious.
What started as a simple remake of a beloved fairy tale had turned into a PR nightmare. And instead of leaning into nostalgia, it felt like Disney was trying to erase the original in favor of something that didn't really click with anyone. So yeah, by the time this thing hit theaters, people were already out. The internet had made up its mind. The controversy was the marketing, and that's never a good sign. So here's how this whole Snow White mess really started.
She's not gonna be saved by the prince, and she's not gonna be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
Back in 2021, Disney officially announced that Rachel Zegler, fresh off her breakout role in West Side Story, would be playing Snow White in their next big live-action remake.
Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. Great little fairy tale. Leave it as is. If you don't like it, make your own one.
It's not been rewritten, though.
It has to be written.
When Rachel says, so we're not doing that this time.
Now, reactions were, let's say, mixed. Some people were optimistic. She could sing. She had Disney energy. But a whole lot of others were scratching their heads, especially longtime fans of the original 1937 classic. Then things started to spiral, not because of the casting itself, but because of Rachel's own interviews.
We don't just sit around and say, yeah, we grew up watching this movie called Snow White, and all of a sudden you show up and we have to eliminate all the memories of these young girls who grew up wanting to have an experience like that?
The first real spark came when she called the original Snow White story weird and super dated. Okay, bold start, but it didn't stop there. In one now viral clip, Rachel said, "That clip went wild on TikTok and Twitter. Not in a good way. Fans were like, hold up, you're remaking a fairy tale that you clearly don't even like?" And it got worse.
Rachel Zegler, who stars as Snow White, condemned Prince Charming as weird and a stalker, adding that she hates the original. Nice start. Leaked photos from a set revealed that the 7 dwarves had been sensationally axed, replaced by multiracial, gender non-specific, magical humans.
You know what? Maybe Disney does. Maybe you're a tool, you're a pawn in this film. You didn't write it, you didn't direct it. You have nothing to do with the creation of Snow White. Right. You should shut up and do the job.
In another interview, Rachel straight up said the new version isn't about love at all, and added that this Snow White won't be saved by the prince, and that the movie wasn't made for men. That last line? Yeah, that's the one that lit the internet on fire. Suddenly, it wasn't just Disney fans upset, it was everyone. Culture commentators, meme pages, even people who hadn't cared at all before were suddenly jumping in. The vibe flipped completely. Instead of people talking about costumes or visuals or songs, everyone was debating if this remake was just another soulless, overly modern reimagining trying to dunk on its own source material. And the sad part? There was barely any real hype left by the time Disney dropped the first official trailer. People were already making up their minds and none of it was good. Fans were clowning the dwarfs, or rather the magical creatures that replaced them. The CGI was called unfinished, and Rachel's past interviews were getting reposted over and over with millions of views. Basically, this film went from Disney's next nostalgic hit to the internet's favorite punching bag before it even released. And all of that set the perfect stage for what Brett Cooper had to say next. So let's talk numbers, because this is where things get brutal. According to early production reports, Disney dumped somewhere between $200 to $250 million into the live-action Snow White remake. That's not even including marketing, which easily adds another $100 million on top. So you're looking at a film that needed to pull in at least $500 to $600 million worldwide, just to break even. But opening weekend, it barely scraped past $40 million. And to make it worse, International markets didn't save it either. The global numbers were shockingly low for a Disney tentpole film. As of the latest data, insert specific source or date here, it hasn't even crossed $200 million worldwide, making it one of Disney's weakest performing live-action remakes ever. Just to put that into perspective, The Little Mermaid, 2023, which also got backlash, still managed to cross $570 million worldwide. Even Mulan, 2020, which dropped during the peak of COVID and had no theatrical release in major markets, pulled in over $70 million from what limited release it had, plus Disney plus premium sales. So yeah, by comparison, Snow White tanked, and people noticed. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score was hovering around the low 30s%, while the critic score tried to be generous, mid-60s maybe. But let's be real, it didn't help the public perception one bit. There's just this growing sentiment, especially online, that Disney has completely lost touch with its audience. People are sick of watching classics get rewritten into something unrecognizable, and Snow White became the latest symbol of that disconnect. It wasn't just a financial flop. It became a meme, a warning sign, and a textbook case of what happens when you ignore the fans and overestimate the brand name. And that's exactly why Brett Cooper's response hit as hard as it did, because a lot of people felt like she said what they'd been thinking for months. So after months of the internet dragging this movie, and Rachel Zegler being at the center of it all, Brett Cooper finally jumped in, and let's just say, she did not come to play. On her show, The Comments section, Brett gave one of the most brutally honest, and honestly, kind of refreshing, takes on the whole Snow White situation. The moment that really blew up online was when she said, maybe next time, Disney should cast someone who actually likes the character she's playing. That line, yeah, it exploded on conservative Twitter, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. But it wasn't just a throwaway roast. Brett actually dove deeper. Her tone was a mix of sarcastic, eye-rolly, but also calmly analytical, the kind of delivery that makes you think she's actually been waiting to say this for a while. She called out the fact that Disney keeps hiring actors who seem more interested in deconstructing iconic characters than honoring them. She pointed out how the studio is using these remakes as a platform to make political or social statements, but at the cost of story, emotion, and connection. And she didn't just criticize Zegler's attitude, she zoomed out. Brett made it clear that this was about more than just one actress. It was about an entire corporate strategy that started to alienate the very fans that built Disney into a cultural empire. One quote that stood out was, "They're not making fairy tales anymore. They're making lectures in costume." And that hit hard because so many people had already been saying similar things, just less clearly. Brett put into words what a lot of frustrated Disney fans were feeling, but hadn't been able to articulate. Another key part of her breakdown was how she contrasted modern Snow White with the 1937 version. She talked about how the original wasn't about helplessness or sexism. It was about kindness, hope, and love. And she basically said, stripping all of that away doesn't make the story stronger. It just makes it empty. And it's not just that Brett roasted the movie. She made a point about culture, about how Hollywood is so afraid of appearing outdated that it's gutting everything that made these stories powerful in the first place. That's why her video popped off. It wasn't just conservative audiences clapping back. It was regular viewers, even casual Disney fans saying, yeah, finally someone said it. Whether you agree with Brett or not, there's no denying her breakdown cut through the noise and added way more to the conversation than just memes and mockery. So why did Brett Cooper's reaction take off like wildfire? I mean, sure, she's got a loyal audience, but this went way beyond that. Her clip wasn't just popular. It was shared, quoted, and stitched across platforms by people who were like, exactly this. And the reason is simple. She tapped into a feeling that's been boiling under the surface for a while now. People are getting tired of Hollywood trying to modernize everything by stripping away what made those stories work in the first place. Fans aren't against change, but they are against getting preached at. And that's where Brett hit the nerve. She basically said what a lot of viewers have been feeling, not just with Snow White, but with a whole wave of recent releases. Think about it. This isn't a one-off. We saw the same thing with She-Hulk, where the message overshadowed the plot, or Velma, which turned into a full-on satire of itself. Even the Little Mermaid reboot caught heat, not because of casting, but because of how forced the messaging felt in places. It's like every remake has to come with a lesson, and audiences are just tired. Brett's take hit because it wasn't just a roast, it was a mirror. She reflected how people feel when they see studios take a beloved story, rework it to fit a narrative, and then act shocked when it flops. And honestly, She said it better than most film critics. There's a clear divide right now between legacy IP and these modern reinterpretations. Studios think they're updating these classics to be more relevant, but fans are watching the soul get stripped out in the process. Brett's commentary worked because it brought that conversation to the surface. Not in an academic way, but in a real, grounded, here's what's wrong and here's why we care kind of way. So no, this wasn't just about Snow White. It was about trust, about nostalgia, about audiences wanting to feel something again instead of being told what to think. And when you really look at it like that, yeah, it's no surprise Brett's video blew up. So after the backlash, the memes, the box office tanking, and now Brett Cooper putting her on blast, you're probably wondering, what did Rachel Zegler say about all this? And the answer? Pretty much nothing. Ever since those viral interviews resurfaced and the Snow White numbers started nosediving, Rachel's been radio silent. No tweets defending herself, no apology tour, no interviews doing damage control, just quiet, which honestly might be intentional. Because let's be real, every time she's spoken up in the past, it's kind of made things worse. Those earlier clips weren't leaked. They were official press junket interviews. This wasn't a gotcha moment. These were her actual answers. So now, silence might be the safest move. Disney's PR team has likely hit pause on her public comments while they try to let the storm pass. But the thing is, when you go quiet after a flop this big, people start filling in the blanks themselves. Some fans think she's dodging responsibility. Others say she's just trying to stay out of the mess. And then there's the growing crowd that feels like she's already moved on, emotionally checked out, leaving the Snow White backlash behind while Disney picks up the pieces. And the silence? It's loud, especially when creators like Brett Cooper are saying what audiences feel, and Rachel's giving them nothing in return. No clarification, no nuance, no, here's what I really meant, which only adds to the perception that she wasn't really invested in the role to begin with. And that's a hard thing to shake once it sticks in the public's mind. So, yeah, the silence? It's not helping. So now that the dust is settling, what does this whole Snow White disaster actually mean for Disney? Because let's be honest, this isn't just a one-time misfire. It's part of a pattern. Over the last few years, Disney has been on a losing streak that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Marvel's been slipping. Pixar's struggling to find its footing. Even their animated originals aren't pulling in the numbers like they used to. And the live-action remakes? Yeah, those were supposed to be the safe bets. But now, with Snow White bombing this hard, and let's not forget the Marvels, Indiana Jones 5, and even Wish underperforming, Disney's having to take a long, hard look at what's going wrong. CEO Bob Iger has already hinted at some big changes. In recent investor calls, he mentioned scaling back content, focusing more on quality over quantity, and, this is key, reconnecting with core audiences. Translation? Okay, maybe we pushed things too far, too fast. Maybe we forgot what people actually want from us. And with Snow White, that realization hit like a truck. This was a movie that should have been a guaranteed win, an iconic fairy tale, a household name, a billion-dollar legacy. But instead, it became a case study in how to alienate your audience. From the moment Rachel's interviews dropped to the disappointing trailers, to the final flop at the box office, every step felt like a misread of what fans actually value. And Disney can't afford to keep misreading. Not with streaming profits still shaky, not with theme park attendance dipping, and definitely not with more remakes already in the pipeline, like Moana, Lilo and Stitch, and Mufasa, The Lion King. So yeah, the fallout from Snow White isn't just about one film. It's a wake-up call. For Disney, for Hollywood, and for every studio banking on nostalgia while ignoring the heart of the stories they're retelling. And after this, you better believe the next round of decisions is gonna be under a microscope. So yeah, at this point, Snow White has become way more than just another box office flop. It's basically a symbol now, a perfect example of what happens when a studio tries to reinvent something without understanding why people loved it in the first place. And Rachel Zegler? Whether fair or not, she became the face of that disconnect. Her interviews, her attitude, the way she talked about the character, it didn't feel like respect. It felt like resentment. And fans picked up on that fast. Then Brett Cooper comes in, lays it all out, and suddenly everyone's going, wait, yeah, she's right. Because this isn't just about Snow White. It's about a shift. In Hollywood, in storytelling, in what audiences actually want. People are tired of lectures wrapped in CGI. They want stories with heart again, characters that feel real, nostalgia that means something, not just IP that's being recycled to meet a quarterly target. And honestly, that's a message Disney and a lot of studios really need to hear right now. But hey, that's just my take. Now I want to hear yours. Do you think Brett nailed it? Was Rachel unfairly targeted? And more importantly, can Disney actually fix this? Or have they gone too far off track? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and trust me, we've got a lot more to talk about. If you made it this far, you're the real MVP. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.